Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I go through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as we recap Season 6. The previous season used to feel like a bit of a slog for me back in the past, but this time I actually found more to like in it than ever. That said, it still came with a sense of achievement when I polished it off because, well, you know, I was excited to get to Season 6. That's a season that I'd always liked even more because it feels like a breath of fresh air. So, imagine my surprise when, thanks to a couple of stories this season coming off a little bit worse than usual, I actually found that on this marathon I enjoyed Season 5 more. Season 6 has never been completely without its problems and frustrations for me, but its average score was always definitely up on Season 5. I mean, a greater sense of variety did help that, and that sort of helped to carry some of its poorer offerings, which those poorer offerings I'd never actually ever considered to be as poor as most, except this time that sense of variety wasn't really enough to carry those poorer offerings. This could sound like I'm getting my complaining hat on again, which is something I never like to do when it comes to Doctor Who, despite what some videos on this channel might suggest. So I do think it's worth pointing out that Season 6 has some absolutely brilliant elements, and while after this particular viewing I don't think I can consider it Troughton's best season, which I did used to, it's still most certainly his strongest season in terms of him inhabiting the role. And whether or not it was a reaction to the sort of like fairly basic story type that Season 5 seemed to conform to, I don't know, but this season definitely still feels like it shoots off in a lot of different directions. The Invasion and the Seeds of Death both feel like they could sit quite well in Season 5, but sitting as they do among the other stories, they end up contributing to the variety rather than detracting from it. We begin with the Dominators, which sees a peaceful people attacked by some rubbish would-be overthrowers, and feels like it's stretching its legs by not being set on a base, despite much of it happening in the Dominator ship and the Dulcian city. And this is followed very closely by The Mind Robber, which could be the most vividly imaginative story in the show's history up to this point. Where the Celestial Toymaker tried something similar but all felt a little bit nasty for me, The Mind Robber has more ideas in it than some entire seasons, and it attempts them all. It's brimming with experimentation and fun, and it comes at a point where it is perfectly placed to re-energise the show, and therefore whoever may be marathoning it. As it takes the crew out of reality and into nothing, like a blank white void, it feels a little bit like it's taking the show out of itself and giving it a jump start, like a much needed jump start. The Invasion might well feel completely like a Season 5 story with its use of the Cybermen and the return of Lethbridge Stewart. That is if it were not for Vaughn. Tobias Vaughn becomes a villain which steals the story from its monsters. The Daleks, the Cybermen, the Ice Warriors and the Yeti. They all loom large over the stories they're in. Where the Invasion is certainly considered a Cyberman story, it builds so nicely and comes with it like a brilliant performance from Kevin Stoney that it's actually more of a Tobias Vaughn story. The Troughton sees Robert Holmes enter the Doctor Who family, and even though this isn't highly thought of, an opinion I could share a bit more this time, I still think he makes an impression. There is intelligence and wit running through this story, and once again it continues to happily bounce me along Season 6 very breezily indeed. The Ice Warriors then get a rematch in what might be the most stark callback to the previous season, Base Under Siege, but which results in a much better sequel. The Ice Warriors was fine, the Seeds of Death is better. The Space Pirates comes along to finish off the recons and isn't anywhere near as heinous as is often made out, although I had to concede on this marathon that it is more lacking than I've previously thought. But then, the finale. And it feels like a finale too. 10 episodes to play with. Malcolm Hulke and Terrence Dicks play with them superbly and construct a story capable of finishing off a season, finishing off a Doctor, and, if it had to, finishing off the show. There are stories with 4 episodes which don't feel anywhere near as pacey as these 10. Plus, Philip Maddock comes along and takes the crown away from Kevin Stoney as the best villain so far. A blistering conclusion to a very satisfying season of Doctor Who, and after 50 stories, it comes with it 2 new entries into the top 10, with a few surprises even for me. Number 10. The Crusade. Season 2's dark horse, probably on account of it being the only incomplete story that season. It still clings onto the top 10, and every time I do a season recap with an updated top 10, I'm always glad to see this story still among them. Number 9. The Enemy of the World. Season 5's dark horse, probably on account of it being so far from the formula that season. It's down a little bit, but we're at a point now where the top 10 is but a fifth of the stories so far. And I love most of Doctor Who, so number 9 is still among the cream of the crop, even at this relatively early stage. Number 8. The Savages. Season 3's dark horse, at least for me, probably on account of it turning up to utterly blindside me and how good it is. It could still be my greatest surprise of the marathon so far. What an excellent farewell to Stephen. Number 7. The Mythmakers. In my opinion, Doctor Who at its most playful, and it's bolstered by the fact that historical productions were very much in the BBC's wheelhouse at the time. It results in a really confident production which I wish existed in full, as I just know it would do wonders for its reputation. Number 6. Marco Polo. It feels low for this one after recent season recaps, doesn't it? I mean, comfortably sitting in the top 4 for a good while now. It's out of the top 5 now, but still, again, another missing story which nevertheless happens to still be one of the very best. Number 5. The Aztecs. A welcome comic streak despite pitch black subject matter, an effective historical setting with an educational leaning, something for each of the regulars to do despite one of them going on holiday for 2 weeks during production, and one of the greatest guest performances in the whole show. Fantastic Doctor Who. Number 4. The Mind Robber. A new entry from Season 6, and I can understand regular viewers of this marathon being surprised that its placing is not at the very top. Yes, it was very quickly my favourite ever story when I was a kid, and that nostalgia will never ever leave me. But this marathon is meant to be an exercise in re-evaluation when necessary, and not just slavishly sticking to previous opinions. And again, 4th place is nothing to be sneezed at. This is still Doctor Who at its best. Number 3. The Time Meddler. While I have the same childhood nostalgia for this as The Mind Robber, because both were shown in the 1992 repeat season, watching with the eyes I have today, I can't help but think that this one has the slight edge over the second Doctor's journey to the land of fiction. This one shakes up the show's foundations in such a confident way, with the added bonus of playing to the BBC's production strengths at the time, that the whole package ever so slightly inches out in front. Number 2. The Massacre. Yep, that means a new number 1, and it should be obvious which from its absence so far. The Massacre is still a story I love with all my heart. It does genuinely brave and commendable things for the show, and it feels like no other Doctor Who as a result. Now, some might say that it doesn't feel like Doctor Who at all, and therefore isn't much cop. However, I think it's a shining example of what Doctor Who is capable of. Number 1. The War Games. A new top dog, and believe me, I wasn't expecting it. The War Games has always been a 5-star story for me, but on this marathon, the epic nature of it, combined with how it doesn't waste a single one of its 10 episodes in a show, where sometimes 4 episodes can feel interminably long, it all makes this a fantastic achievement. It's never been my very favourite story before, so having it at number 1 does feel unusual. Obviously, it can be dethroned, but with my opinion shifting more than ever on this marathon, I'm genuinely excited to find out how long it can hang on. William Hartnell had 10 companions to his name. Now, 2 of those did cross over to his successor, but even taking that into account, Patrick Troughton only had half of that amount. And with Zoe joining the show really late in the previous season, does her presence in Season 6 affect my top 10 companions list? Number 10. Sarah Kingdom. A commenter on a previous video mentioned that the addition of Zoe to the crew would indeed knock Susan out of the top 10, and, well, I suppose that was a given really, wasn't it? But what's rather nice is how I find Sarah Kingdom still here. She wasn't even in the show for an entire story, but was strong and different enough to make an impact. If she's out by the next one of these, that's no shade on her character. Number 9, Polly Wright. I've said it several times, but Annika Wills is far stronger than Polly is as conceived. She does wonders with what she was given, but I'm left a little frustrated on this marathon at an inconsistency with Polly's character and her strength. Had Sarah Kingdom hung around longer, she'd likely be higher than Polly, to be honest. Polly's placing at the moment is pretty much solely down to how good Annika Wills is. Number 8, Ian Chesterton. He just keeps sinking down and I feel immense guilt. How dashing and daring Ian made the show work as well as it did in the very early days can't be overstated, but as with Susan, the template of the companion was refined since, revised and improved upon the older the show got. William Russell may be one of the show's most esteemed VIPs and always will be. Ian does find himself a victim of being the template for the younger male heroic companion rather than refining it. Number 7, Ben Jackson. See, Ben beats Ian for me because he is another in the line of younger male heroic companions. It's just that his voice is so different from Ian's, literally and figuratively, that he gives the show such a different flavour, as well as breaking a mould. He is highly underrated, in my opinion. Number 6, Victoria Waterfield. If Zoe hadn't been as good as she was, I'd still be missing Victoria now. I do if I think about it, but Zoe being so different means I never really get a chance to miss Victoria unless I pause to think about it. A Victorian damsel in distress is what Victoria could have been every single week, but thanks to Deborah Watling's measured performance and some stronger writing for her than is remembered, she actually proves herself to be a stronger character than her reputation suggests. Number 5, Stephen Taylor. The Massacre and the Savages both give Peter Purves ample opportunity to prove how good he is. But his time with the Doctor has an impact on him thanks to care and consideration being paid to Stephen by both Purves and the programme makers. He's more fleshed out than Ian by far, with more variety given to him along the way. Number 4, Vicky Pallister. Essentially a like-for-like replacement for Susan, young girl with more future knowledge over Ian and Barbara who forms a granddaughterly dynamic with the Doctor. Except Maureen O'Brien made her far more than that. She doesn't just play it as surrogate granddaughter, she plays it as friends with the Doctor, and that helps make her feel more of an equal and gives her more agency. Number 3, Jamie McCrimmon. Having one of his 5 companions last almost as long as Troughton himself did means that I've appraised Jamie twice already. Nevertheless, he is a constant presence throughout Season 6, and does that affect his character? So, in my opinion, Jamie and the Second Doctor have one of the more believable and entertaining rapports between Doctor and companion in the show's entire span. However, when Victoria departs and Zoe comes aboard, something happens. While Jamie no doubt still gets some truly excellent stories and moments, when Zoe enters the fray, I noticed on this marathon, the show tends to become more occupied with building up her relationship with the Doctor than it does with Jamie. He still gets his chance to shine, but by now it feels like we know him, whereas Zoe is the breath of fresh air swooping in. So it's no wonder he gets ever so slightly sidelined in favour of her. Truth be told, Jamie's story was done well before he left, but that isn't to say he outstayed his welcome at all. He could have left soon after, or even with Victoria, and that would have been fine. But the fact that he hung around, I'm kind of glad he did, because one of the joys of Season 6 is actually watching his friendship with Zoe unfold. It's as much of a delight as it was watching his relationship with the Doctor develop. Number 2, Zoe Herriot. Yep, better than Jamie. And I never would have thought it, but I do feel any lower would actually be doing her and Wendy Padbury a disservice. Always partial to Zoe, I actually took to her even more on this marathon. And very quickly and effortlessly becoming the very best thing in her debut story, she rapidly set about becoming an indispensable part of the crew and proving herself to be one of the most adept companions so far. She fit right into the TARDIS team and struck up very real relationships with both the Doctor and Jamie. Given far more opportunities to show what she was capable of than Victoria or Polly ever got, Zoe rises higher up my list of favourites than she's ever climbed before. Number 1, Barbara Wright. Yep, still at the top, and as much as I love the higher entries on this list of companions, something about them still feel like characters in Doctor Who. Something about Barbara, perhaps enhanced by the loss of Jacqueline Hill before exhaustive interviews and several returns with her could take place like it did with other companions. Barbara just feels real. Like Zoe is played by Wendy Padbury, but Barbara Wright feels like she actually existed. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this recap of Season 6, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a like and share. And what are your thoughts on Season 6? Is it Troughton's best season, or does his era end with a whimper? And what do your top 10 stories and companions look like at this point compared to mine? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you back here soon for the continuation of the marathon. 253 episodes, 6 seasons, 2 Doctors, and the whole of the black and white era down. I now find myself at the biggest overhaul of the entire marathon so far. New Doctor, new companion, new format, colour, change. On to Season 7, but we're not saying goodbye to the second Doctor just yet. As with the first, I'll be doing a couple of videos looking at the second Doctor's appearances in media beyond the TV show. I'll be ranking all of the second Doctor's TV stories and doing one last video on my thoughts about Patrick Troughton's incarnation. So if you don't want to miss those, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you back here very soon.